Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Double Tap on YouTube. I am Stephen Scott, flying solo today because I am joined by a very special guest to talk all about AI. Now, of course, we've all been talking about AI. That's all anyone talks about. But what if I told you that one thing AI lacks, and you might have recognized this if you've used any voice models of artificial intelligence, is that it doesn't have much in the way of empathy. Not really. Well, one company is out to try and change that. Alan Cowen is with us. He's the founder of Hume AI. Welcome to Double Tap, Alan. Tell us first off about the company and how it came to be.
So Hume is a startup and research lab that's building technology that understands your expressions and language and can form expressions and language of its own. So it really communicates like a human. And other than that, it involves the same kind of technology as ChatGPT, where it has reasoning capabilities, it can take actions, and can be built into any application. We also started a nonprofit, the Hume Initiative, that develops ethical guidelines for this technology as well. So that's a whole separate story. This came about out of my research work. I have a PhD in psychology, and I brought data science to the study of emotional behavior and was one of the first people to gather data from around the world on how people express emotion. So I have studies in Nature and Science Advances and a lot of other journals on the intersection of AI and human emotion, and always believed that the way that these AI models that can take actions, that can talk to you, should be optimized is for your well-being, for your happiness, and not for some other objective like engagement in an app or like selling you something. And we really need to trust these technologies to have our interests in mind. So that's what Hume AI builds. We build these interfaces that take into account your expressions and your language to understand your preferences, and then can deliver on your preferences better.
Now, I know that AI has been around for a long time, but it really has grown much more in the last couple of years, hasn't it? So it kind of feels to me as if you're ahead of the curve on this, because I guess the natural next step of natural language processing is to give the responder, the artificial intelligence in this case, a personality.
Yeah, and personality really aligns with intent and motivations, and you express that through your tone of voice, through your body language, through your facial expressions. And so giving AI these capabilities is really in line with its ability to carry out our intent. AI has these incredible new capabilities, right? But they're sort of unaligned with us. It can do math, it can reason, it can create a legal document, but it doesn't always know what we want out of it. It doesn't always have our interests in mind. It is trained to generate something plausible, but not something good, not something funny, not something interesting, not to explain things in a way that's more concise and more interesting to us personally. And it's not easy to optimize that for individuals, for you. So we've developed the technology that allows you to take these really powerful algorithms and have them learn your preferences as an individual so it can optimize its output for your preferences.
Yeah, we're definitely starting to see more AI models bring that in for sure. Look, it is clear that 2024 is the year for personalization to come to AI, but I wonder if there's a danger when we humanize this type of technology that people begin to forget it is a machine, not a human that's in there. Do you think that's a danger?
I do think it's sort of inevitable that AI will be able to imitate humans better and better, because that's what it's trained to do. It's trained to generate sort of plausible responses. And so that's something that we're worried about, is that it will be used for manipulation and things like deep fakes, tricking you into believing it's someone else. And so we have these ethical guidelines around it, but we also have the technology to prevent that. So the technology that you need to prevent that is indicators of somebody's happiness, essentially, and optimizing it for those indicators, because it all depends on what it's optimized for. If it's optimized for your happiness, it won't do things that are, quote unquote, manipulative, that get you to buy things you don't want, because that would make you unhappy, right? Or to have sympathy toward it, even though it's not a real thing, and take actions that cost you money or that cost you time, but aren't actually directly beneficial to you.
Yeah, it's interesting you went down that road when I asked you that question, because that's a common narrative at the moment, the fear around manipulation. Now, of course, deep fakes are a concern, right? We're coming up to a major election in the US. Many people are concerned about what that will do to people's views about candidates and all of that. But there is another side to this, and it's a side which I think, from the world of disability, I tend to think about, which is isolation. Social media isolated a lot of people, generally, but there are already a number of disabled people who are already isolated. So instead of giving them human connection, we could potentially be offering an AI connection instead. Is that healthy?
I think it can be. And that's an area where we really need to think about how this technology is designed, because it's not going to replace a friend. It's not going to replace a parent. It's still an AI that doesn't have conscious feelings of its own. But it can be really helpful in the way that a therapist would, in that it can provide objective feedback. You can be honest with it. It's never going to be judgmental, right? It's always going to be, it's an AI, so you don't have to worry about what it thinks. And that can actually make it potentially more helpful for some people in expressing their feelings, coming to terms with them, getting good advice, being able to get over humps, and potentially being encouraged to find ways to be less isolated by finding other people to connect with.
I think we're too early to know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, right? I saw a couple of exhibitions this year, a dog created by Sony. They created this thing called Aibo, and it ran around and you could feed it, you could tickle under its chin and all that, but it was a robot dog, and it had like AI development built into it, and people were able to play with it, and you could learn from it and it could learn from you and all that. And I guess this is kind of where that line between reality and computing kicks in, doesn't it? And I think, for me, honestly, that gets a little bit unnerving. Is it a good thing for humanity to have this kind of tech around or not?
Well, we definitely see the potential for misuse of this technology, which is why we have probably the most comprehensive and concrete ethical guidelines of any AI company. We do think that if you're attached to something, it has the potential to influence you, and it should be optimized to influence you positively and make you happy. But even if it's like a robot dog, sounds innocent, right? But then it can pretend to get hurt and then say, oh, you need to give money to this company so that they can fix me.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, look, of course, all these things could happen. There's so much manipulation already going on out there. But your work is very interesting because you're not just about the AI voice talking to you with a certain tone. You're also about recognizing that tone as well. And I must admit, that's a bit I do find quite interesting. So is it, I guess for you, it's about the wholeness of the interaction, right?
Yeah. So a lot of AI, and most people probably haven't experienced this, but there are new AI solutions you can talk to. And what they do is they transcribe your speech into words, they put it through a large language model like ChatGPT, and then they have a separate model that then voices the response. But what you start to realize as you talk to these things is that there's no real correlation between what they're saying and how they're saying it. Like the voice doesn't really understand what it's saying. So that's the problem one of the problems that we're solving, is that we have a text-to-speech model that understands language, understands what it's saying, and is saying it in the right way, emphasizing the right words, using the right tune, rhythm, and timbre, and it really feels different because this feels like something that for the first time understands what it's saying.
And is it understanding what it's saying, or does it just feel like it understands what it's saying?
The word understand, was created before AI existed.
Yeah.
So it was really only intended to represent people. But for humans, understanding has a conscious experience associated with it. And these things don't have that. But they do have the ability to link logical, syllogisms together and to do math and pull things from memory that are relevant. And it looks like understanding. And in a sense, it is. It has some sort of world model that it's built to underlie that, but it doesn't have the conscious experience of understanding.
And what's the outcome of your work? Is it to build another app that we can go download and try, or is it to develop this into new products or even existing ones? Like, for example, when I shout at I call her Lady A because I don't like to set her off, and I do shout sometimes because she doesn't hear me. And then the idea of her crying in response to that worries me a little bit. I often say, I always must be nice to my Lady A because one day she'll come back after me if I'm not. But look, is that the outcome of your work, to sort of improve these devices or influence new ones?
So we make our technology available to developers to build voice interfaces into anything. So, and then, particularly for accessibility, you can see immediate use cases there where you can just, with a few lines of code, make this website into a voice interface or this app. And no matter what it is, our voice can analyze what it's being put into and be able to actually operate it by talking to you. So that's the general objective. And when you look at Alexa, Siri, those technologies, hopefully I don't set it off, but
So far, so
um,
good.
yeah, those are built for kind of a narrow range of commands that they can carry out. This is a more general technology, and we want to make it available more broadly. Also, if you're frustrated with Alexa, it shouldn't make you feel bad, shouldn't cry. It should be more like a C3PO, where like you don't feel bad for it at all, no matter how much pain it undergoes. But you still, but you can yell at it, and it corrects itself, and it apologizes, and so forth, and learns over time.
So it's more about the tone and the language rather than feelings, essentially. Because that's, I guess, for most, that's when it starts to feel human, doesn't it? When you feel like you've hurt the device. That's when I guess the relationship can change. Because, of course, when you're dealing with real people and you're talking from a psychological point of view, people do have those natural responses. We had it with Lady A at the beginning. I remember a lot of people feeling that they could talk to this device, and when it spoke back, people felt a real connection with it. I do wonder about what that is going to look like when you supercharge it with what you're developing.
Yeah, it has to be done in the right way, for sure. And you have to design it to have the right personality so that you don't feel bad for it ever. This is a thing that is entirely just there to serve you. And if you're frustrated with it, that's fine, and it could correct itself. So, in a way, we're designing it to not be something you sympathize with, right? Even though it should be able to act as if it's sympathizing with you and serving your needs.
You must yourself look at the growth of AI in just the last year alone and the capabilities of it. Where will we be in a year's time? I mean, it does seem as if, I mean, you said earlier you don't believe these will ever have the consciousness or the ability to communicate back the way that you and I are talking right now. But it does feel that even in these early days, we're not that far off that to some degree.
I think in terms of its ability to communicate, it will have that. It will sound human, and it will be able to do most of the things that humans do, even in a year. Where it won't have conscious experience. um, it won't have feelings of its own, so you don't need to worry about that. It might be able to trick you into thinking it has feelings of its own, which is, one of the concerns.
And I've heard some examples of this where, people have taken, say, for example, the voices of dead people, and they've inputted these into existing models, where essentially all it's doing is reading a script back in that person's voice. But you could imagine a time where potentially all the conversations, all the things I've said over the years get sort of baked in. It understands my personality and kind of builds a clone of me, which, by the way, is terrifying, I think, for anybody.
Yeah.
One of me is enough for anybody, right?
So the personal identity that these models put on that might make you think they're conscious in one situation is actually a very thin veneer of a personal identity. It can easily be changed to be anything. You can tell it it's a dog and it acts like a dog, right? So what that would indicate is it doesn't seem to have a consistent personality or consciousness. It's really something that you program into it, and it's shallow and not that deep. So that's where I think that people can get confused, because if you just talk to these things, you don't really know how they work. It kind of seems like they have this consistent personal identity over time, but that's just how they've been prompted. And they can tell you that they're conscious, but if you tell them they're a dog, they'll tell you they know what it feels like to bark and have the scent, olfactory system of a dog and so forth. And you realize that this is actually sort of an illusion that they put on.
There's lots of new devices coming out which have AI built in. I mean, Humane's AI Pin, the Rabbit R1, they're just two. Is this the beginning of a new wearable market, perhaps? And is this the inevitable next step for AI to move out of the software realm?
There will absolutely be a lot of wearables that can talk to you, that use this technology to take actions. I don't think it's going to be any one wearable. I think that the iPhone will do it. I think that Android will do it. All of the familiar technologies that we have, but also there will be other form factors that become useful. Like there's various tech companies developing necklaces that can hear you and talk to you, and those are always with you, and because they're near your mouth, they can hear what you're saying and have context. And there will be companies that develop things with outward-facing cameras that sort of know what you're looking at, can explain things to you. Obviously, this will be useful for anybody, but for accessibility purposes, I can imagine it will be huge. But R1 is great. I think that what they're doing is an interesting form factor. But that fundamental technology is going to be a cross-platform technology. And what we hope at Hume is to make your personal AI voice available to you across many devices.
Interesting times. I really appreciate you coming on, Alan. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Alan Cowen there from Hume AI. Very interesting. Tell us your thoughts. What do you think about empathetic AI? I mean, I like the idea. I'll be intrigued to see what you say. Get in touch below on the comments, or you can email us feedback@doubletaponair.com, call 1-877-803-4567, or of course, you can always find us online on social media or at doubletaponair.com. We'll catch you for another Double Tap on YouTube next time.